the Synergex mission of advancing applications and partnering for success. We've been working with Turnkey Computer Systems now for the last few years, and I can't imagine a relationship, a partner that better embodies that mission. Through a series of collaborative engagements, we first worked with this company to design the architecture, an N-tier client-server architecture that leveraged their investment in their application and yet incorporated a modern, leading-edge user interface. Those here last year will no doubt remember Billy Hollis's presentation on UX design. And Billy's worked with Turnkey now to develop that user experience, that user interface. And this project incorporates those good design concepts. So I'm really proud and pleased to introduce Brad and David Blackburn from Turnkey Computer Systems to demonstrate their application. So, Brad and Dave.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Hope this has been a good conference for you guys so far. I know it has been for me. Just a little bit I'm David Blackburn. I've been with Turnkey Computer Systems since 1993. I'd make it 23 years. And this is Brad Chadwick. He's been with Turnkey for 6 years, and he comes complete with a master's degree in software engineering and database management. Now, I've got a bachelor's degree myself in computer information systems, and I used to think that people with master's degrees didn't really count. They just had 2 years more school than I did, but I've got all this experience, right? But I can't tell you how valuable Brad's knowledge in the N-tier server architecture has been. So he's been a really valuable deal moving forward with Turnkey software. Just a little bit about Turnkey. We was established around 1978 as an entrepreneurial startup specializing in accounting and selling timeshares. In 2013, we were acquired by Animal Health International. Animal Health International is a large animal health medical veterinary supply company that basically catered to the production animal industry, which was, the large cattle feeding, swine feeding, dairies kind of companies. And in 2015, last year actually, Animal Health International was then purchased by a company named Patterson Companies. Some of you guys may be familiar with Patterson because they have dental software, and they also make the dental equipment that goes in dental offices that makes your caps and crowns. And they also have a division that's big in the companion animal business, veterinary software. They have veterinary software clinics, or software for the veterinary clinics. And they also sell veterinary supplies, cat food, dog medicine, wormers, and all that good stuff. It's a big, huge business. And they're worldwide, and so they swallowed up Animal Health International. What started out as a mom and pop shop are now part of a multi-billion-dollar company, which is good because now we actually have resources to do what we're trying to do. And since we're owned by a software company, they understand what we do. So that's kind of where we're at today. In the early 80s, we found a niche in the cattle feeding industry, and that's been our main focus ever since. We started out as a DEC value-added reseller, and we sold a complete turnkey hardware and software solution, hence the name of the company, Turnkey Computer Systems. We continued to sell DEC equipment until the demise of DEC. You guys probably, some of you guys, hopefully not everyone, is familiar with some of this hardware that you're seeing on the page right there. That's kind of a throwback to the past there. We currently have about 250 customers using the Turnkey system. As you see, here's our logos of some of our customers. They range from just single user systems from all the way up to about 30 simultaneous users in some of our bigger multi-company corporate systems such as Cargill Meat Solutions. At any point in the time of the year, Turnkey's software is managing probably 60% to 65% of all the cattle on feed in the whole U.S. So, if you go out and have a steak tonight, more than likely, there's a high probability that steak you eat tonight has has been managed by Turnkey Software at one point in time of its life cycle. Turnkey feed yard accounting system was first developed on a PDP 1103 that had 5 megabyte disk drives, and they thought that was awesome back then. Then they upgraded to what they said was a fast PDP 1173, which could run our notes interest receivable calculation program in less than 30 minutes, and they thought they was really getting along great then. The programs were developed using DEX business language Dieball. Turnkey took advantage of disk work in developing DBO for multi-platform environments, and we started selling our software on VAX, SCO Unix, and the Microsoft Windows platform, and that was when we really kind of took off. And Bill Mooney's alluded to our partnership between Turnkey and Synergex for a long time. We was on one of his slides that showed how long we had been there for. Our most successful platforms were initially SCO Unix and later Red Hat Linux. The development tools that we've used were basically the VI editor on the Linux side, and I think it was either Eve or EDT on the VAX side. I don't remember. I never used those. I was a VI guy, so we also used CMS was used for our source code control system. If you look at the screen there, that was what our typical menus look like. If you wanted to run cattle records, you entered the number 1 and enter, and it brought up your cattle records program. Now in 1995, we toolkitted it, and that's what our toolkit menus. We turned from the old number style menu entries to the new and improved toolkit entries that you see there. You used your arrow keys to navigate, right and left, down and up, using the arrow keys. And here's what our Windows version looked like. Similar thing, just in a Windows format there. This is what we call our cattle receivings entry screen here. This was our typical data entry screen. You had your numbers. You started at field 1 and you entered through all the fields. Even if you didn't have any data, you would have to enter through all those fields, and when you got to the end, it would ask you if you wanted any changes. Some of you are probably familiar with the NECN routine, right? So if you wanted to make a change to say field 30, you entered 30, your cursor popped into the field beside 30, you made your change. You pressed enter and returned out and all that good stuff, and then maybe you even pressed the do key when you was done to save it. Here's just another example of a data entry screen for our pin charges. On the left is the Linux version, on the right was the Windows version. Not much difference there. And here's one of our master maintenance files. It's our lot master. If you'll notice there's not much white space. Every little place on that screen is taken up with something. Even the blank stuff that you might see there is probably just because this data didn't have anything that occupied that blank space. But in fact, this screen here took 2 to 3 other screens to actually show all the data in that file. So keep that in mind for a later version of our new system, just like LotMaster. Back in 1994, I went to Sacramento and attended Gary Hart's toolkitting class. If any of you guys remember Gary Hart. And then I come back, and this was the first screen that I ever did that I utilized the toolkits that Gary Hart had taught us. Had the nice borders around the screen. I used the old window designer. Many of you probably remember to design that. Here's just another example where you had one window overlaid with another window and using toolkit technologies. So what are the strengths of the Turnkey legacy system? It's time tested. It's been out in the field for 30 plus years. As far as our software development staff, we have probably over 100 man years of just plain old experience and knowledge of the cattle feeding industry among the developers at Turnkey. Our support staff is knowledge and experienced. The actual back-end business logic or business core has a really broad reach in the industry because we've probably had over 500 or 600 different feed yard customers over these 30 years, and we implemented a lot of ideas out of each one of those systems, and so we got a really broad reach that'll fit a lot of people's needs. We were always able to respond to most customers' needs quickly, and it's got the fast, dependable Synergex ISM-based file system. What are the weaknesses? The main weakness side I see is just it's a UI character-based technology. And also there's some processes and data structures that maybe we just threw together on a whim back in the years ago, didn't think they'd ever be used much, and we continue to use them, and so they're poorly designed maybe, and we need to rethink them as we move forward. And it doesn't utilize some of the new technologies that we have available to us today at all. So likes and dislikes, what do our customers think about us? In discussing likes and dislikes over the last several years when we're deciding what to do moving forward, we asked customers what they thought. Well, to me it was kind of a generational thing, much like what Bill has talked about. We've got maturers running our system, by the way, and all the baby boomers, that I'm not seeing a lot of baby boomers out here, they didn't think anything was really wrong with it. In fact, when we started talking to them about replacing the system, they said, well, you're going to make me use a mouse, or you're going to take my enter key away, and so forth. But if we talk to the younger users, they get annoyed with our system. They don't know that they don't like that it doesn't use the mouse. They don't like that it's not intuitive and user-friendly, and they don't like the fact that it's very procedural. So when we decided to do something different, because we had competitors that were out there popping up here and there, there's not, and just along that point, we do control most of that market share, but there are some customers that are, or some competitors that are actually starting to pop up. We knew that our software is falling behind. We watched more of our progressive customers actually taking it upon themselves to do certain things that we couldn't do for them. We knew that the Microsoft platform was where we should be, but we all had different ideas on how to get there. We developed several peripheral applications utilizing tools like WinForms, C#, VB.NET, XFODBC, and XS Server Plus, and we were successful with all those technologies, but it's still lacking something. One thing, it was difficult for us to develop in, considering we were getting very used to Visual Studio. So how did we decide what to do different? We employed PSG to help us. Steve Ives made several visits to Turnkey and over those years we went through several different exercises trying to find the proper path that fit us. And just to make a long story short, we decided on using a pilot project that was using WPF, Synergy.NET, and Microsoft WCF services with the intention of using Mono to run on a Linux operating system. We finished that pilot project, and several things still bothered me about it. Mono would not run on at least 75% of the Red Hat versions of Linux that we had out in the field. It required Red Hat 6 or greater. A lot of our Linux servers were still on Red Hat 4, so that was a problem. They was going to have to be upgraded. But the biggest thing was that it occurred to me after we did the pilot project is that we were novices in the UI design field. We had some great looking WinForms app that utilized third-party controls like Infragistics and DevExpress, but I knew that we could do much better in the WPF, and the WPF pilot project was somewhat less than desirable. So I resorted to Googling WPF UI design apps and came across this really great looking app that some guy named Billy Hollis of Next Version Systems had done. And to make another long story short, we ended up utilizing the services that Billy Hollis offered. If you were at conference last year, as has been mentioned by, I think, Bill earlier, Billy Hollis came and he did a presentation to you guys, and really is a great speaker, and he actually labeled himself as a UI design evangelist, which he is. He really evangelizes that stuff. So got lots of good ideas, lots of theories, tried and true tested theories that he brought forth, and hopefully in our UI design in the future we can make good on that. He came to our office and gave us UI design classes, and then we hired them to actually code our shell to get us started. He recommended doing that because as XAML novices, In C# novices, well, we're not really C# novices. We've been doing that for quite a while. But as far as XAML, we were novices. So they did in 3 months with writing our shell what we may have taken us a year. And even after we got through with our own shell, we might not have liked what we done, but we may have had to have lived with it. So I think it was a good move that we hired him to do that. Now we had a few, since we've been working with this shell, we've had a few issues with it, but they've worked with us real good and they've resolved all those issues that we've complained to them about. And to be fair, it was their first UWP app as well, so they was kind of in a learning curve as well. Actually, some of the work that Billy Hollis has done for us is he's exhibiting on his own website. So if you want to go visit Billy Hollis's website, I believe it's Google Next Version Systems, and you can probably find it. So here's just a slide of some of the technologies that we're both utilizing today and have utilized in the past. We knew it was going to take us about 3 to 5 years to convert our entire suite of applications, and we didn't want to end up with a system that utilized old technologies and became obsolete immediately. So in our discussions with PSG and with Billy Hollis, and Billy Hollis actually had a little bit of insight to the direction of Microsoft. He relayed to us that in his discussions that WPF development was not really getting any investment dollars at Microsoft, but rather they were investing in the future with XAML and UWP apps. Therefore, we thought it was a good fit to proceed with XAML and UWP, just hoping that we would get a little longer shelf life out of what we ended up with, since it was going to take us so long to actually finish our project. I'm just going to skip this Universal Windows Platform slide because you guys have already done it. So other than what we like about it, it's going to give us a little bit more options on what kind of devices we can operate on. Plus the common API, we really like that idea. But one of my biggest things is it's got adaptive controls and responsive design. So, you can take a properly designed XAML application, put it on this resolution X, and if you change the resolution, if you buy a different monitor that has a different resolution, your XAML app will look the same. It'll might be just clearer and sharper. Now here's just a XAML code snippet. If you've never seen XAML before, that's kind of what it looks like. I think Richard showed some earlier in some of his slides. It's the language behind the visual presentation of our application. It lends itself to developing very robust and great looking applications. This is where we are having to make our biggest investment in learning something new. And that's why we employed Billy Hollis to come to our office and actually give us a 4-day class on how to do XAML. And that was a great kickoff for our XAML programmers at the shop. Resolution independence, I just briefly already touched on that. C#, we're utilizing C# for the code behind and the view models. And we have extensive use of asynchronous coding methods. If you'll see what's bounded by red there, it's public async void method that task awaits a setup selector method call. We utilize ServiceStack. ServiceStack is an open source framework designed to be an alternative to the WCF and ASP frameworks. And we chose ServiceStack over WCF because we knew that a full implementation of WCF probably would not run in mono and may have been limited. In the end, we have decided not to use mono, but we stuck with ServiceStack. We also found it a little easier to implement than WCF in code. And it's touted to be a little bit faster than WCF, but our test results in both really didn't show a significant difference, with ServiceStack truly being slightly faster, but it wasn't a determining factor on what we ended up doing. Time-tested DBL business logic that we had in our legacy, along with the Synergy ISAM files that Turnkey has invested in over the last 30 years, makes Synergy.net the only true logical course for our server-side code. Synergy.net allows us to retain our investment in the business logic, as well as utilize our existing staff members that already knew both Synergy DBL and .net. And we were able to tap into the experience of the PSG group as well in converting our existing code to Synergy.net. We are refactoring the existing code base where a lot of code over the years was just copied and pasted over time, and we're taking all those methods, or all that legacy code, and we're refactoring them down to classes and methods that are reusable, easily maintainable, and unit testable. And we're also excited about Synergex's commitment to Windows 10, the UWP, and the strides in making Visual Studio a great place to develop DBL apps in. Yeah, I really applaud them for putting Visual Studio and Synergy DBL where it is today. That's great work, guys. Our data access methods are 100% select statements of collections of objects. So we make heavy use of select statements. And what you see on the slide is our use of inline lambdas. That was a really great tool that you guys gave to us, and I applaud you for that. We use lambdas all over the place for sorting and filtering. So it's really been valuable in what we've been doing. Synergy data files, we upgraded all of our old files. Most of them were Rev 4 or older. We upgraded all our ISM files to Rev 6. Some of our old file structures did not even have primary keys. We added the auto sequence, the creation, and the update timestamps to every file, plus we added some empty file space into those files and wrote file conversion utilities to convert them. So later down the road, if a customer needs us to add a data column to a file, we can do it with the snap of our fingers. We made really heavy use of CodeGen. Steve Ives provided us with some base functionality templates, and Kish Bailey and Brad Chadwick extended them even further. Here's just a little CodeGen template that generates our data objects based on the repository structures. Let's see, repository structures are converted to data objects using CodeGen, and our data objects expose the Synergy data as .NET types. All of our CRUD methods are in the data access layer of CodeGen. All CodeGen classes that are genned as partial classes so that we can extend their functionality as needed with, say, custom classes. And we intend to use at some point CodeGen to generate the XAML for some of the simpler types of maintenance forms to maintain data in our files. We utilize the MVVM pattern. It provides us a separation of concern. You probably all heard that term. It provides us loosely coupled, clean separation between application logic and the user interface. It allows us for highly maintainable code, easier to test, and easier to change. We've covered this in the past in Synergex conferences, and there's a ton of info available on the net if you want to learn more about MVVM. Kish and Don stole my thunder on unit testing, but here's a method that has the attributes for a test method, and as Kish discussed this morning, the test properties that groups them so we can run specific groups of tests. Okay, here's our in-tier server design. If you look on the bottom, we'll just go from the bottom of the pyramid up. All our data objects exist at the bottom of the pyramid. All those are CodeGen. The data access layer is next up. It consists of mainly our CRUD classes that we also CodeGen. These are partial classes that can be extended as needed. And next up is the business layer that we're factoring from our legacy, and PSG is offering their assistance in that. And lastly, this all sits under our RESTful service layer. And a bigger picture here that represents our ability to allow the UI to utilize the business layer and data from multiple servers. In our business, we'll have a corporation will own multiple feed yards, and we'll have servers that sit at all those different physical locations. In the past, they've never been able to run consolidated company reporting, so we've designed this architecture to allow them to do that. The UI that sits at the top there makes web service calls to the routing and aggregation service. That routing aggregation service determines where the data is and where the business logic resides, so it makes calls to whatever specific server that it needs to. Our application is really, really huge. It may not be as big as some of y'all's, it's probably a lot bigger than some of you's. So there's about 20 to 30 different modules. Our feed yard package alone, which is our flagship product, probably has about 900 to 1,000 source code files. And so when I was approached about doing this, I didn't really know how to do it. So being a simpleton, I just would think, this is a big old elephant out there, and how am I going to eat it? So it's just one bite at a time. So we attacked our flagship product first, which was feed yard accounting. PSG come on site, Steve Ives did. We enumerated, and Don Fillion, I believe he was there. We enumerated all of the screens, all of the reports, all of the utilities, all the functions into a list, and then we broke that list down into distinct business functions such as cattle activity, billing, commodities, inventories, and so forth. And we then broke each one of those areas down, and while Billy Hollis started coding on the shell, we started, our programmers, developing the reports, because we didn't know how to do the UI yet. Billy was going to come to town and teach us that when he got his shell done. So once we got that shell in our hands, Billy Hollis came, he did the class. We also utilize, and we're trying to learn how to utilize, a hybrid agile development process, utilizing daily stand-ups with our developers, milestones, release iterations, and so forth. And we also beefed up our internal development staff by hiring 4 new programmers, and I'd have to agree with Bill's assessment on the millennials. We have hired 2 millennials and working out really good. One kid really has a special eye for design, so that's going to be a good addition to our development staff. Now we'll start with the demo. And here's our login screen. It's a token-based security system, so once Brad logs in, he will be issued a token, and that token will be maintained in memory, and it will be passed along with every service call back to the web service here. We're going to use role-based security, so we will be able to allow the users to design their own roles so they can go into role maintenance, add components, and what I mean by components is either a report or a menu entry or a data entry screen. They can assign components to roles and assign roles to users. So when a user logs in, he will only see his menu entry or programs that he's allowed access to. This is our menu screen on the left. It's a fly-out menu. Brad can collapse that if he clicks on the hamburger menu. That's the little 3 lines for you baby boomers. The millennials will know that. So we collapsed our menu, and you just see little icons there that represent whatever function they serve. So if he slides it back out, then we've got our menu. So we've got settings, we've got feed yard management. So we've got our menu, and just to the right of the menu, we've got our alerts. Users can subscribe to alerts, and we'll have a set of canned alerts, and alerts are just little blurbs that will show up on the home screen that bring attention to problem areas in their operations, or good things, or so-and-so's birthday, or payroll needs to be taken a look at, what have you. In the middle part of the screen, we've got just some basic feed yard statistics. In this particular case, we're showing how many head of cattle's in the feed yard and so forth. On the right side, we've got what we call favorites. So favorites can be thought of as your web browser bookmarks, if you will. Turnkey's menu system, if a user has access to all the modules, the way they navigate, they may have to click on menu, then cattle activity, then cattle receiving, and so it's a tree structured menu. They could have to drill down a long ways to get to what they want. And if they use that all the time, it could be time consuming. So they can just favorite that, and it will appear as the favorites on the right hand side of the screen. Plus they can get back to their favorites on the menu on the lower left hand side. Yep, there's the favorites. Okay, what we're doing now is we're going to the receiving home. You notice the animations. It's showing the last 25 cattle receivings in a list there, and if the thought behind that is they may need to edit some of the last cattle transactions they've done. So if they choose to edit one, there's an arrow over on the right-hand side. They can click on that, and they can pull it up and edit it. The reason there's a menu there is because some of our options are to edit, to delete, and so forth. So they might have several different things they can do to a specific line item, but in this case, they can just edit it. So if Brad wanted to make that a favorite, if you'll see that little, it's already favorited actually, but if that was not a favorite, that would just be a white star. If it's a yellow star, it means it's favorite. He can either turn that on or off as a favorite just by clicking on the star. That's just another visual cue thing that Billy Hollis taught us to use. He's big on using visual cues on stuff. And I'm not sure that we've utilized that effectively yet, but we're learning how to do that. Okay, open items. So what an open item is it allows users to multitask, if you will. So take your regular cattle, what we call desk clerks at a feed yard. They're sitting on the computer doing the daily work, entering the transactions and so forth that they have to do on a daily basis, and they get customer calls. So they get a customer call, and on the old legacy turnkey system, they would either have to abandon the work that they was currently working on, get out of that and go over to the menu system, navigate to the customer screen and pull up their information, relay that to the customer, and then they would have to figure out where they was back in the paperwork, go back to their cattle transactions and restart over, basically. This allows them to actually keep one process open and start another one. They don't have to, their daily workflow will be much better this way. So what Brad did was he's got 2 open items now. And it looks like a web service is running a little bit slow there for some reason. So he opens up the open items, and he can go back to receiving, or he can go back to that death entry or what have you. So it allows him to multitask. And that is part of the shell. Let's go to environments. Historically, on the turnkey legacy system, we had, if you was to examine anyone's environment variables on a Linux system, we would probably have maybe 30 or 40 or 50 environment variable settings. That was mainly because it was quick and easy to do as a programmer. If a customer needed a switch to do something, we didn't have to add it to a parameter file. We didn't have to put it in a UI where the user could get to it. We could just get a programmer to go in the environment, set an environment variable, and then the code check that environment variable, make whatever we need to make happen. Today, I've decided to consolidate all those environment variables into an ISAM file, and Kish Bailey's wrote an override to the getlog environment, getlog system, or getlog function. I think we seem to have a little bit of problem with our service here. But Kish wrote an override to the getlog function, and that getlog function examines our environment file for a value in there, and if that environment variable exists in there, he makes the appropriate. Anyway, environment variable XYZ is set to Y to do this function, is set to no to do this function. If he finds it in the file, then he utilizes that value. If it's not in the file, he'll resort back to the traditional environment settings to see if it's there, and if it's there, you guys know what getlog does. That will keep us from having to have a bunch of environment variables in memory. The only thing we will have to have in memory now is just the minimum environment variables that allow the DBR runtime to operate. We won't have to reboot servers. We won't have to refresh the IIS services. So we get back up and running here, pull up the lot master. And by the way, this is a beta system. It's not at any of our customer sites yet, so you might have to bear with us. Sometimes it does do unexpected things, as happens in many of my demos over the last 30 years. So if you remember when I told you to keep in mind the lot master, old legacy lot master screen that had lots of fields, lots of data on it, hardly any white space, this is what our millennial come up with for our lot master. So what we got on the right is an accordion menu. What we have on the top left is just some basic information about what we call a cattle lot. And then the tiles on the bottom are just some information that rotate from time to time. And if you want to click on one of those to drill down on it, if you click, it'll open the appropriate accordion menu on the right-hand side and offer you up more information about that. So there's what Brad calls a good one, and I'm not sure what that means, but I guess got some good numbers on it. Okay, so that, I think that's a really, really nice design, and that kid that designed this has probably been on staff now for 2 months, 3 months tops. So he's picked up XAML real quick. I haven't actually had the opportunity to introduce him to Synergy.net yet, but he will get that opportunity. But I'm trying to utilize his UI skills right here at the present time. One other thing that's been prevalent in our industry for over a decade, it's been a rumbling that everybody wants a pin map. And if you've never drove through the Midwest or drove down a highway and seen a bunch of cattle and a bunch of pens, that's what a feed yard is. So this is an aerial view of what a typical feed yard really looks like. It's basically probably, in this particular case, it's probably, I don't know, 500 or 600 acres of cattle with probably 500 or 600 pens. And what a manager wanted to be able to get out of this was he always wanted a visual of, say, where my empty pens are so I can put cattle in them when they come in. Where are my pens that have a death rate that's unacceptable? Where are my pens at that have a high morbidity rate, or they have animals that get sick? Or where are my pens? Where are my steers located? Where are my cows located? Where are my bulls located? That sort. So we've got pen views down there at the bottom, and they can click on those and they can find out where that's at. So what is that? So here's all the pens in this feed yard that are colored turquoise that have a death loss greater than 4%. And so if one of them pens is interesting to them, they can click on that pen and drill down onto that. Now, the reason this has been a rumbling in the feed yard industry for over a decade, and not many people attempted to ever do it successfully, but I think I finally found a path forward to do that. In the past, people would get out their CAD/CAM systems, just painstakingly draw each pen. It never turned out to be a realistic drawing. The other options was to go out and physically walk through all those pens, and there's hundreds, it's probably 20 miles worth of stuff you'd have to walk through to actually measure each pen there. And of course that's not economically feasible to put somebody out there to do that. We have another crash here, I guess.
No, debug.
No, it's a debug trap. Nice. Okay. Make a long story short, I was digging through the Universal Windows samples on GitHub one day, and I downloaded their samples, and I thought, well, here's a Bing Map API. So I started playing around with their Bing Map API sample, and I put a debug breakpoint at where a click on the map was trapped, and lo and behold, it returned me a GPS coordinate that had sub-meter accuracy on it. So from then, I just sat down and I made a little pen map, and I sat down from my office and mapped every pen on that yard in less than 3 hours. So we finally have a way forward to give the feed yard managers what they want. Also, and this is a Bing Map API for Universal Windows. I think they first came out with it in Windows 8, but they also universalized it too. Also, they have asset tracking. So we intend at some point to utilize asset tracking in this map. What asset tracking means is a feed yard has big trucks that have big beds on them that hold 20,000 pounds of feed. They drive down those feed yard alleys and they deliver feed to these animals. Well, one of their problems is how to route trucks to use less fuel. They're always trying to economize. They want to know where their feed truck is at any point in time. So if we ever utilize asset tracking, we'll be able to draw that little feed truck going up through that pen and up those roads and stuff. They also want to track where their cowboys go. They have cowboys that ride the pens and they check the animals and pull the sick ones out and doctor them. And they want to know what they're doing. You know, are they sitting in the coffee shack drinking coffee, or are they actually out working? So, you know, at some point in time, we'll be able to track those as well. That pretty much ends the demo. Any questions?
You're getting animals coming into the feedlot and they're going through scales and medicines and all that sort of stuff. Are you interfacing to like Gallagher and Rudway and that type of thing?
We interface with Gallagher tag readers, all kinds of, Allflex, Gallagher, Temple, there's Destron, all of them. That's part of our business.
Any other questions?
Did I understand that you're using the Bing API as part of this application?
Yeah, that's the Bing Maps API, yes.
Could you speak a little bit about the ease of making use of that API?
It was so easy, it scared me to death. Because we'd been, really. I was astounded how easy it was. Because in the industry, we've been looking for how to do that for over a decade. And once I figured out that I could click on the map and it would give me a geolocation back that was had sub-meter accuracy, I was in business, because I could sit there and click on four corners of a pin, and I store those to a Synergy ISAM database file. So for each pin, at least it's a polygon, so it could have multiple points, more than three or more. And once I had those points stored in a Synergy ISAM file, I could say, give me that pin's geolocation points, and there's a map polygon class, map polygon method within that API that I just say, here's the points, draw a polygon on the map, and that's what you end up with. We had to build our own method to determine what polygon you clicked on, but I Googled that in a Sunday afternoon and did it, so it's not a big deal. Does that answer your question? So we did an aerial view. You could do the map views. There's all kinds of stuff that you could utilize doing this. It's very, very easy, so don't let it scare you. Now, you do have to license it if you sell it. So there is a Bing Maps light known user license, which we'll utilize. I think you can have 1,000 known users, and you have to report it, but you don't have to report anything unless you go over the 1,000 users. So it's really, and we'll never have 1,000 users for years. Any other questions?
So how far away are you from going into production with what you're showing there?
It's really kind of hard to say, because we're having to coexist with legacy, and we're trying to make all these improvements with our repository structures and ISAM files. But my plan is to start turning part of legacy off in, was it June or July? July. So we're segmenting off the specific business requirements into groups, and we're doing it in stages. So hopefully at the end of July, we'll start turning what we call our cattle activity piece off in legacy and forcing them to use this. Forcing is not a good word, but in some cases it will be.
With the map overlay, if that yard was to put in another row of pens, would they have to remap the whole lot, or could you integrate them somehow?
We have a utility that I developed that will allow them to actually draw more pins onto the map. And this is the problem with the Bing Maps and the Google Maps as well. In rural areas, they don't fly over that and take new pictures like they do in town. I think I reviewed this, and this was like a 6-year-old map. So in those cases, we're just going to have to freehand more pins on there. Yeah.
Buy a drone and take your own photograph.
Yeah, we could do that. Now these are copyrighted pictures, so you can't just take a screenshot and then do your own overlays on them just using a screen capture of those. So that's why we kept everything above board and bought their license. So I think it was only like $3,000 for 1,000 known users, something like that.
David, Brad, thank you very much.
Thank you.